back to Hang and Vibe, episode 10. As I mentioned in previous episodes, this week I will talk about some of my own music. But before I do that, let me talk about my week. So starting, of course, with Sunday, we had William Kessler preach again, both morning and evening last week. In the morning, he preached on Ruth, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. The sermon was titled Naomi's Story. And he made an interesting point, like Naomi's story is basically our story, because the gist is that, all stories kind of start... Well, the point that he made was that every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And a lot of times we are stuck at the beginning of the story, and it feels to us like the end, but ultimately it's only the beginning. So you look at Naomi's story, for example, and she loses her husband and loses her 2 sons. All she has left is Ruth and her other daughter-in-law, and she goes back to Israel because she left Israel because there was a famine, but after her family died, she went back to Israel, she had lost all hope of ever having a life again. So the points that he made, the first point was Naomi's circumstances. It takes place in the days of the Judges, which was a politically unstable period of time in Israel's history. As we've looked at in Cliff's sermons on Judges, Israel's constantly rebelling and constantly being overrun by enemies, and then it's like a cycle. God sends a judge to deliver them. They have a time of being prosperous, and then they get rebellious again and conquered by their enemies. So, yeah, it's just kind of a horrible time for Israel. So there was a famine, like I said, and her husband died, her 2 sons died. So the next point is Naomi's interpretation. And like I said, she just has no hope. She's quoted as saying she went out full and she came back empty, which, the preacher mentioned is kind of ironic because she went out literally with no food. So it's like, how can you say that you were full? But I think the point is that she had a family. She had a husband and kids and everything. So I think she recognized that, she had something that was worth more than food. So she felt full, even though she was hungry. But now, even though she has food and everything, she's returning to Israel without her family. So she feels empty. And so, her interpretation is that the hand of the Lord is against her. She feels like maybe she's being punished or something. So she decides to change her name to Mara, which means bitter, because she believes that God has dealt bitterly with her. So her circumstances affect her very identity. She sees herself as, someone who has a bitter life. And I can kind of identify with that sometimes. You sort of start to feel like your circumstances are who you are, But then the next point is, after Naomi's interpretation, we see Naomi's reality, which is that God is with her. And what's the evidence that God is with her? The preacher points to Ruth as that evidence. Naomi doesn't quite see at the moment what having Ruth with her means, but ultimately we see that Ruth, well, for one thing, Ruth has this devotion to Naomi and to God that should kind of inspire Naomi, but she does kind of just ignore it. But ultimately, Ruth, gets married again and has a son, Obed, Obed has a son named Jesse. Jesse has a son named David, and David becomes King David. So yeah, Ruth ends up being a blessing to Naomi, even though she felt like her life was over. So yeah, just some interesting points there, I guess, points of application. Well, I don't know about points of application, but interesting points of theology, I suppose. I'm sure if I meditated on it more, I could find out some application. Actually, his evening sermon was kind of connected. All of the sermons he preached were kind of connected. He kind of did that on purpose, it seems, because he kept calling back to his other sermons in his sermons. So the evening service, he preached on Matthew 11, 1 through 6 again, Great Expectations Part 2. And this is where he actually went into detail about Jesus' answer to John's disciples. So, to recap, this is where John had these expectations of what the Messiah would do, and it doesn't look like Jesus is doing those things. So it feels like he's against him, kind of like Naomi felt like God was against her. And the point, the main point, I think that one of the main points that William Kessler brought up was that Jesus is calling us to be observant, intentional observation. And so, Jesus is always saying things like consider the birds, consider the lilies, or even, in the Old Testament, consider the stars. So he wants us to observe the world and to consider and meditate on the revelation that God gives us. In this particular case, he's telling John's disciples, see the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news preached to them. So these are all things that are alluded to and quoted in Scripture. And John would have known that, but he had a narrow focus on certain promises that he expected to be fulfilled. And, Jesus is saying you need to expand your spiritual framework and realize that Jesus is the Messiah. He is fulfilling the promises in Scripture. It's just that the promises that you are looking for will be fulfilled later. So, yeah. And another point that he made was that we should trust the report of others. When it seems to us like life doesn't make sense, we should listen to what other people are saying. So Jesus tells John's disciples to go and tell John what you hear and see. So a lot of us as Christians are called to go and tell what we've witnessed. And if we are being witnessed to, then we should trust and believe the witness of other Christians. Because I think sometimes we can be so focused on our own life. I should speak for myself. I can be so focused on my life and think like, well, my life isn't working out the way I expected it to, and God doesn't seem to be fulfilling the promises I believed he would. So God must not be good or something. I wouldn't say that, but that's kind of how I think sometimes. But if I look at other people's lives, other Christians and stuff, I see God doing good things for them. And instead of being, envious towards them, I should see that as, well, they are my brothers and sisters. They are part of the body of Christ. So if God is blessing them, He is blessing the church, which I'm a part of. So God is still good. John is witnessing all of this from inside of a prison. So just because John is not experiencing the blessings that he thought he would experience doesn't mean that Jesus is not fulfilling the promises that he made. But yeah, and then I think the biggest point and the biggest takeaway for me was the last point he made, which was that we need to keep Jesus central. Jesus says in the final report that he was giving to to John's disciples, he said, "Blessed is the one who is not offended by me." And the point, the quote that William Kessler made was, "If we take our eyes off of him, we trip over him." I don't know if that was a quote from him or if he was quoting someone else, but I like that quote because it's true. Like, if we take our eyes off of Christ, we can stumble over him and trip up and everything. So yeah, and there's another quote that one of our old pastors, Marcus, would constantly quote to me in particular. He would always say, "For every look you take at yourself, take 10 looks at Jesus." And I really need to be better at that because it's good advice, and it's very practical. Like, if we focus too much on ourselves and on our own lives, it does cause us to stumble because, yeah. So this week, I went camping over the weekend. Every season I try to do a spiritual retreat. I started this a few years ago. I haven't been consistent with it, but this year I am trying to be consistent with doing this weekend spiritual retreat. So I did one in the spring and I did one in the summer. The one I did in the spring, I didn't reserve much time for spiritual retreating, actually reading scripture and reading and stuff. But this time I tried to make more time for that. So on Thursday I drove to Sleeper State Park, which is on the tip of the thumb in Michigan. Spent the night there, and in the morning Grim and I went to the beach because they have a dog-friendly beach there. And we sat on the beach. I started reading this book called Love Me Anyways by, I can't remember. So, sorry. I'll put it in the description. But yeah, it's called Love Me Anyways. Kind of just about love in general, as, a Christian virtue, and as, God's being. God is love. So this book talks about how we should love one another and how God loves us. I managed to read about maybe a little bit less than half. So I still have more to read. But it was good. I don't know that I took a whole lot away from it, but maybe when I finish reading it, I'll get more out of it. I basically just wanted to read something that would help me sort of feel more of the love that cognitively I know that God has for me. but I don't always feel, I guess, strongly that love. And I think that affects, how I love others, because, if I don't feel the presence of love in my life, then I'm not gonna have very strong feelings of love for others, for my brothers and sisters. But that's what I want to kind of work on and grow towards. So that's why I'm reading that book. So I spent Friday morning reading that, and then I packed up my tent, and Grim and I went to Thumb Brewery, which is in Caseville, and I enjoyed that. I had a blackened walleye sandwich, which was amazing, and I had a beer that was called I think it was the Flattened Frog Hazy IPA, and when they brought the beer out to me, they had a little plastic frog on the rim of the glass, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is better than I expected. And the beer tasted really good too. It was very tropical, fruity tasting, and I normally don't go for tropical flavored beers, but because it's summer, I just was in the mood for something tropical, so I had that, and it was very good. Yeah, after lunch, we drove to... I headed to Lakeport State Park, and on the way, I had to stop for gas, and I stopped for gas in Port Sanilac, if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't even know if that's how it's pronounced, but while I was there, I remembered that in doing my research for this trip, I had seen that there was a blues festival going on in Port Sanilac, and I was like, well, what time does that start? Because I'm here now. If there is music going on now, I might as well go check it out. And I just happened to get there right when it was starting. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll go watch some blues. So I went around the corner to the park where they were doing that, and Grim and I sat and watched a blues band playing some music. So we sat there for about an hour, and then headed back to continued on our way to Lakeport State Park. First, actually, I went to Walmart and picked up some hot dogs and some bamboo skewers so that I could cook hot dogs for dinner. And yeah, we had hot dogs for dinner. I listened to some podcasts. I listened to Doctrine and Devotion, which is a podcast that I really enjoy. Unfortunately, they haven't been making new episodes, but I listened to some of their old episodes. And yeah, and I did a little bit more reading as well. And then we drove to Marine City, which is right by St. Clair River, and we watched a light-up boat parade, which was kind of cool. They had these boats drive by that were all decorated in like Christmas lights and all kinds of decorations and stuff. There was one that was all decked out in like Star Wars themed stuff, and the passengers on the boat had lightsabers, and they were like dueling each other, which was really fun to watch. But yeah, so after the boat parade, then they did some fireworks, and I actually watched the fireworks from inside my car because I was getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. So I decided to head back to the car and watch the fireworks from there. But then I drove back to the campsite and slept, and then on yesterday, I did a little bit more reading in the morning, then drove to Port Huron, there's a bridge there that goes over to Canada. So I parked right under the bridge, and there's like a river walk that goes along the river. So Grim and I just kind of walked along the river, and, just enjoyed a nice stroll along the river. We went downtown because there were a couple restaurants I wanted to check out, but they had outdoor seating, but there was no like staff outdoors. So I couldn't figure out how I was gonna like get seated outside if I couldn't bring Grim into the building. So I was just like, well, I'll just leave and And I was gonna go to in Port Huron. There was a sand sculpture festival going on, and I was kind of thinking of going to that, but at that point I was just getting kind of bored and not really up to spending too much more time away from home. So then I just drove back home and spent the rest of the evening at my parents' house. So yeah, that was a good trip. Okay, so let's get to the music. So again, these are songs that I have made in my history. Starting with a song I made in 2009. The song is called Input. Back in these days, I was recording using Audacity, and just basically with a microphone hooked up to my computer, and I was making my music with a DJX keyboard. So a lot of the synth and stuff in this song and the piano was all played on a DJX keyboard. I just recorded with a microphone. And then I used a lot of samples from a website called Sample Swap, which was, a website where you could get like drum loops and synth loops and stuff. So I used it for a lot of drum loops and just other effects and stuff. So this song in particular, it's got a very dance music kind of feel to it, and a really nice piano riff that I quite like. And a lot of the music I made around this time was kind of dancey. I was kind of into like Family Force 5 around that time. I guess they kind of inspired some of the sound of my music. But skipping ahead a couple years, in 2011, now I had switched from using Audacity to another program called Mixcraft, which allowed a little bit more control over like looping and stuff, and like the placement of loops in specific measures, and you could like change the tempo and stuff. So it allowed a lot more control over the layout of the song. Also, Mixcraft had some built-in samples and drum loops and stuff, so I didn't have to download loops off of Sample Swap. So the other thing is, during like when I was in high school, I really wanted to play a lot of like live instruments. So I was playing guitar and playing bass and stuff. And in this song, I actually played electric guitar, and I played the bass and everything. So all of the instruments all the guitar and the bass in this song are actually played by me. They are looped, of course, so it's not like I played the whole song all the way through. I played like a little bit of it, and then I just loop it. So it's kind of like the way Bayon made his music, I guess, except I wasn't doing it live. I did it in post-production. But yeah, and then there's a really cool part where it's like a distorted guitar section that is kind of like a little guitar solo. And then after that, the song ends with like a distorted bass riff. instrument at this time was bass. I could play guitar a little bit, but I was mainly focused on learning bass. So I liked playing the bass, and I liked the sort of distorted bass sound. I used that in a lot of songs around this time. So the song ends with a cool distorted bass riff. That was in 2011 from my album called Hope. Another song from that album is called Full Speed Ahead. And this one, there was no live instruments. I used Mixcraft. Mixcraft has a way that you can play, guitar and bass, and piano and violin and all that stuff on the software. So I used the software to compose like a guitar line and a bass line and drums and everything. This song also has a little bit, like I said, of piano and some violin. During this time, I really wanted to make music with live instruments, and so I think I made these songs with the intention of someday playing this song for real. And this was just sort of my way of composing it, coming up with ideas. But obviously that never became a reality. It's still just electronic composition. But I think it sounds pretty cool. Anyways, in 2012, I created an album called Orison. One of the songs from this album I like is called The New. And at this time, I had pretty much just embraced the electronic sound. I was like, I can't, play live instruments, so I might as well just embrace the electronic style. So The New has a more electronic sound. This song is in 5/4 time signature, so I was definitely trying to experiment a little bit with different time signatures. And the part of this song that I really like is there's like a drum fill, and then it goes into this violin part. And I really like the sound of that violin melody, and it just has a pretty sound throughout the rest of the song. Another song from that album is called Feel It. This is a slower song, kind of has a bit of a waltz-like sound. It's in 3/4, and it's got this pretty sawtooth synth melody that plays throughout. And there is a section of the song where the synth kind of builds up and adds additional melodies on top of itself, and builds up and gets more and more fleshed out. And then it just cuts out and goes back to the one synth. So in 2013, somehow I managed to break my computer and had to take it to a computer repair guy, and he fixed it, but it couldn't run Windows anymore, so he installed Linux, and I didn't have enough money to buy a new computer, so I was like, well, I'll just deal with this. And I found a software for Linux that you could create music on. I think it was called LMMS. I don't remember what that stands for, but it was Linux's version of a digital audio workstation. And I created a few songs using that. One of my favorite songs that I created with it is called The Skies. It has just these really cool, like, looping synths. It has a very sort of airy, ethereal kind of vibe to it. And I like it. I like this song. Eventually I did get a new computer and I was able to reinstall Mixcraft, so for the rest of the songs on this album I used Mixcraft. Another song that I like is called Respond. The album this is on, by the way, is called 135, and that's a reference to Mark chapter 1 verse 35, which is where Jesus gets up before dawn and goes out to a remote place to pray. I just liked the vibe of, like it being early in the morning before dawn and going out into a lonely place and being with God. Actually, the album cover for this album is a picture of me standing in front of a park at dawn, and I just think it's the perfect album cover for this vibe that I was going for. The song Respond, it's a very fast-paced song, kind of has a bit of like punk rock vibes to it, or at least punk rock influences. And this one part has like these really cool shimmering synths that I enjoy. It kind of builds up a little bit and then stops at one part and picks back up with some like a beat with like some rim shots and stuff. And then like builds up again to like this sort of heavy, almost like a breakdown. I mean, I was inspired a little bit by metal at this point, so I kind of liked the idea of having a breakdown section in my music. But obviously it's not like a metal breakdown. It's just more of a kind of electronic punk. I don't know. And then the ending is cool where it like switches back and forth between like sort of a soft beat and then heavy hard beat and then back to soft and then back to heavy. The next album, also released in 2013. I was actually doing a lot of recording in 2013. That was kind of the pinnacle of my music making in like 2013. I was just like all about making music. So I released another album called Sequester. And this album has a more like outer space kind of mellow sound. The song Puzzle is one of my favorites from this album. And this is a song that back in the episode where I talked about Tycho, I mentioned how his philosophy was, he just kind of makes music and it sort of happens. He's like sort of there to witness it. That's kind of what happened when I made this song. I started making it and I had an idea and I created this kind of synth chords, and I created the chords, but I didn't put them in the order that they ended up in initially, but I just kind of was messing around and moving the chords around, and I just sort of accidentally put them in the progression that they're at in the song, and it sounded cool, so I was like, oh man, I like how this sounds. And it's kind of like I had the puzzle pieces and I just put them together and made it fit like a puzzle. So that's the inspiration behind the name of the song. But yeah, this song, it's got a really cool, like, kind of a Boards of Canada sound, to be honest. I was definitely... Boards of Canada has always been a huge inspiration for me. So a lot of my music is very much inspired by Boards of Canada. So yeah, this song has a pretty IDM Boards of Canada sound to it, and the part of the end with like this sort of synth melody, I really like the kind of beeping melody at the end. Yeah, I enjoy that. And then another song from this album that I like is called Shimmer. And the intro to this song is it's actually a like chopped up version of another one of my songs. And the sample plays throughout the rest of the song too. I can't remember which song it is. I think it might be Mistral, which I'll share in a later episode. But yeah, I took the song and chopped it up and reordered it and put a bunch of effects on it. And that's how I created the sample at the beginning and throughout this song. Later in the song, this sort of synth melody appears and it sounds very chill and very happy. When I listen to this song, I always imagine like looking up at a palm tree and seeing the sun shimmering through the leaves, which obviously is how I got the name Shimmer. Later in the song, these wind chimes come in, like this wind chime sound effects, and that definitely helps to give it that shimmering vibe that I was going for. The next album I made in 2013 is called Shadow Day, and one of the songs I like from that is called Ignore. This one also uses a sample, like a chopped up version of a song that I made in the past. That song is called Boiling. And yeah, I took the bass from that song and kind of edited it a bit and looped it and stuff. So that's the sample that you hear in this song. The synth, like the lead synth in this song, it sounds like almost like some kind of like African pipe instrument. I don't know, it's a synth, but it just has that kind of breathy, like you're blowing into a pipe kind of sound. And the cymbals, this is gonna come up a lot, but the cymbals sound like ocean waves to me. That's kind of what gives it a sort of summery vibe to me. There's a part where there's like these slow, like gentle cymbals. Coming in, and then they just sort of like crash, like crashing waves. Another song is called New Frame from that album. I feel like this song, it's got kind of like a construction vibe, like you're working on something or planning something. That's kind of why I named it New Frame, because it's like, to me, this was the inspiration behind the title was like a new frame of mind, you know, like you're I don't know, like how scripture talks about renewing your mind, I guess to me that's what this track was sort of about. It was like renewing your mind, like there's a new blueprint, a new plan for your frame of mind. There's a part in this song that also has some kind of ocean crashing waves sounds in the cymbals. The next song is called Lunar, and this is the song that I mentioned in the earlier episode when I talked about A Beacon School. The artist A Beacon School uses like guitar samples that are chopped up and stuff. That's the method that I used in this song. Back in 2009, I was dating a girl who sent me an audio recording of herself playing an acoustic guitar. And at one point in the recording, she actually messed up and played the wrong note, played the wrong chord, and then she tried to correct herself, but like every time she tried to correct herself, she was playing the wrong chord, and so it was like she's frantically like, playing multiple chords trying to get the right one. But the chord progression that she ended up accidentally playing, I just loved so much, and I was like, that sounds great. That sounds better than the entire rest of the recording. So I ended up sampling that section where she messed up the chord progression, and I used that as the sample in this song. And in the intro, in the outro, and in a section in the middle, I chopped it up a bit and spread it out so that it creates a different sort of melody. And the synth bass in this song sounds really good. I don't know how I achieved that sound exactly, but something about the synthy bass in this song just sounds really good and fits the style so well. All right. After that album, I kind of took like a year to make the next album. So in 2014, I released an album called The Breaks. I released also a sort of B-sides album where I released some songs that I didn't put on the main album. So from the B-sides album, there's a song called Flexing that's really good. This is still with Mixcraft, but I earlier in the previous few albums, I was mainly using a synthesizer called Messiah on Mixcraft. And in this album, I was experimenting with a different synthesizer called Impulse, which just has a different way of making sounds and different sounds that you can make with it. So I experimented with that for this album. This track, Flexing, it has kind of a dance vibe to it. There's a lot of arpeggiated synth lines, and there's this one melody, this like distorted sounding melody that was kind of a fluke. I don't remember exactly how I created that sound, but I just used some effects to make it, and it sounds pretty interesting. So it sounds especially cool where at one point there's like an extra harmony added later in the song. So the unfortunate thing about this song is at one point it does glitch out really badly, and that's just something that kept happening around this time. My computer at the time just didn't have very good memory. Like it didn't really have the CPU power to keep up with the what I was trying to do with it. So yeah. And then in the end of the song, I put in this kind of cool, interesting, distorted bass line. That's sort of how the song ends. Another song from that album, from the B-Sides album, is called The Breaks. And this one's really cool. It has an awesome drums and this awesome synth bass line. It's got this cool, like, underwater sounding synth. And it kind of builds up to it was supposed to build up to a really cool moment where it like all the instruments come in at once, but again, it unfortunately glitches at exactly the worst moment. So that song didn't make it onto the full album, pretty much because of that, because it was broken. And then from the full album, The Breaks, one of my favorite songs from that album is called Contact. This one definitely has quite a summery, like, island feel. It has this really cool bass line and lead synth that I really enjoy. And there's these like cute bongo drums that give it that island feel. There's this one section that I really like, the distorted synth notes in that section. And I like at one point in the song, it gets quiet and there's like a cool synth note that fades in, kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of like rises in, and it has this kind of like mysterious sound to it. And yeah, I like this song. I enjoy it. Another song from that album I like is called Super Whale. It has a funny name, but this one's got like this really like a lot of distorted bass and this side chaining effect, which I didn't even know at the time what side chaining was. I just kind of achieved it on accident. But yeah, this song has a lot of side chaining. Again, like the cymbals have that sort of sounds like waves crashing, or to me sounds a little bit like a whale spraying water. That's kind of why I gave it the name Super Whale, because it just sounds like this big boss whale that's like just spraying water epically. And then the song Exhale, Exhale. The intro to this song is kind of wild and a little bit crazy. But then it sort of mellows out a bit in the next section. And then it cuts out and kind of gets even more mellow. And then this section, the melody switches to like this electric piano. I put put in some upright bass as well and some flute. And yeah, I really like the vibe of that section of the song. Then the synth bass comes back, and the lead synth comes back, and this white noise fades in and fades out, and it sounds like either ocean waves or like someone breathing, which I guess fits better with the name of the song. But yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move along because we're getting late on time. The next album I made in 2016, so I actually went a couple years without making music, and in 2016 I released an album called Movement, and this one also had a B-sides album. From the B-sides, there's a song called Blossom Alt. There's a song called Blossom on the main album, and this is like an alternate version of that song. In this album, I was using a program called Caustic, which is a mobile program that you can use on your phone. So I had switched from using the computer to now I was using my phone to make music. So this has a lot of different sort of sounds in it. This song in particular, it's got like a cool marimba-like synth melody. It uses a lot of bit crushing, which is an effect that I was kind of obsessed with at the time. I used a lot of that effect in this album. There's like a bass line that has these ascending notes that I really enjoy. The other song I like is I don't know how I would pronounce this. Beach. I meant to write beach, but I misspelled it and just kind of went with it. This song, it's got this cool bongo beat and some pretty synth pads and this cool like glitchy synth lead. The really interesting part about this song is it ends with this like barrage of glitchy sound effects. Caustic has this secret menu that you can enable that gives you access to like these glitchy sound effects, which I never really used much except for in this particular song. But yeah, it gives it an interesting kind of sound with all the glitchy sound effects. Okay, and then moving along to the album itself, Movement. One of my favorite songs from that album is called Saculum. This has a distorted, slowed down, and reversed sample from another song called Armageddon, which is actually the next song I'm going to talk about. But I took a sample from that song and reversed it, slowed it down, distorted it. I think I used that same bit crusher effect on it. And there's a sermon by R.C. Sproul on Ecclesiastes that I sampled. At this time, I didn't even know who R.C. Sproul was, so it's kind of cool that back in 2016 I ended up accidentally using a sermon by R.C. Sproul.
So you might as well do it with gusto. That's the creed of modern. And that creed is as old as people.
But yeah, it just has this really cool like ethereal sound. At one point, it shifts from being in mono to stereo, so it kind of has this cool effect of like opening up. And I kind of imagine like, you know, I picture like a book, the pages of a book opening when it does that sort of shifting section. And like I said, the next song is called Armageddon. This song kind of has like a Deadmau5 sort of inspiration. It's a pretty like dance sounding track. There's a neat synth line at the beginning and this awesome synth bass. Starts out pretty simple, and then after the beginning it kind of adds some more notes to it, and there's this text-to-speech voice that is repeating the line, "When the world is coming to an end, I will go outside and lift my arms high and wait for him to arrive." I like the sentiment of that sort of picture of, you know, a person going outside and like raising the arms like, yeah, take me home. And then later in the song, this kind of plucky melody is introduced and has this really cool dance sound to it. Movement was released in 2016, and it took until 2022 before I released the next album, which is called Loamhide. I sort of gave up on making music for a long time, but in 2022, I finally released an album that I had slowly been working on for several years, again using Caustic mostly. From the B-sides of this album, I like the song Restart. The intro to this song is really awesome. It's got this like distorted bass boom with like a lot of bells swelling in and out. Kind of sounds epic a little bit. There's this cool bass line towards the end with like a switch up in the drums. This song unfortunately ends pretty abruptly just because I couldn't be bothered to finish it. That's the case with a lot of the songs on this album. I just didn't get around to finishing them because I was not really motivated to put all that much effort into these songs. But from the actual album Loamhide, one of the songs that I really enjoy is called Electric Shore. This melody kind of builds layer by layer. It's like you hear sort of one note playing and then additional notes come in on top of that, and it sort of builds up and up and up. This quiet bass line comes in, like in the background, and then everything, like the drums and the bass cut out and it's just the melody, and then this other drum beat fades in, and then this heavier, louder bass line comes in, followed by this awesome lead synth that sounds like a dance kind of synth melody. This song also was sadly abandoned and never really finished. But a couple of songs that I did finish, one of them is called Screen Swimming. It started out with like just a scale, like a melody kind of ascending a scale, which actually appears in the middle of the song. But then I added this piano part with like just mash of notes that I just mashed together to see how it would sound, and I ended up accidentally creating this really cool chord progression, which is the chord progression that I used for the most part of the song. There's one part of the song where there's like a pitch bending effect where it bends up from like a lower pitch to a higher pitch, and I like the effect of that. And then, like I said, halfway through the song, it switches to a section where it's like this like ascending scale, and that's where the song originally began. But yeah, then like this melody comes in in the outro with like this synth choir. That I enjoy that sort of melody, and then like the piano that comes in and kind of finishes out is really fun to listen to. The first song on the album is called Oubliette. This one it's kind of a synth wavy song. I used a sample of a home video. The particular video I used is actually a home video of my sister when she was born, and my mom was just sort of holding her in the hospital. So you hear kind of, little baby noises and stuff, and my mom talking quietly. I liked and you hear like the sound of the camera. And that's like the main thing you hear is just the like machinery inside the camera whirring and clicking and stuff. So I liked the sort of old school vibe that sound gave. So yeah, and then you have this like cool synth bass, these like down pitched drums that give it kind of a synth wavy vibe. And then what really gives it that vibe is I incorporated the Windows pop-up sound effect. So yeah, literally just I took the sound effect and used it as a sample in this song. And then there's one section where it gets quiet and like cuts out a bit. I really like that part. And then it builds up to like a separate, like a second half of the song. There's like these fading in chords that kind of remind me of the opening to Jurassic Park, where it's like, like the drum hit and like the kind of vocal choir like fading in, and it like kind of almost dissonant sounding. And then the rest of the song actually was originally a separate track, but they just sounded like they went together, so I combined them. So now they're just two halves of one track. Okay, just one more song, and then I have to go to church. The last song is called Narrative. This one's got like a xylophone melody and also incorporates a sample from a home video. This time it's a video of me as a toddler trying to climb into a chair on our front porch. It's mostly just you can hear like the outdoor sounds and stuff. I incorporated this like vocal sample that's really heavily affected. I think it was just a text-to-speech vocal sample that I just kind of like reversed and put like these crazy effects on it. And then this like awesome bass line comes in, and the drums have a phaser effect, which was my attempt at emulating, you know, Tame Impala and other chill wave artists. That also has like this heavy side chaining, which at this point I actually did intentionally. I learned how to actually do side chaining, and that's another effect that a lot of chill wave artists use. So this song was kind of my attempt at a chill wave song. And yeah, that's where I left off. I haven't really made any new music since 2022. I'm open to it, I guess. I guess if you listen to this episode and you enjoyed the songs that I shared and you think I should try to get back into making music, let me know. Post a comment or send me a message and say like, hey, your songs sound good. Keep making music. Maybe I'll try to get back into it. But yeah, lately I just haven't really had the motivation or the desire to keep making music, but I'm open to it. I would do it if people wanted me to. So yeah, that's it for this episode. I am now gonna head to church, and next week I'm hoping to have Mike and or Ben guest appear on the episode again, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, enjoy your week. Talk to you next time.